another Thunder Thursday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor, soon to be joined by our complete Thunder coverage team. From downstairs in the newsroom just below me, right here, right now, is our columnist Jenny Carlson, who wrote on some Christmas Day leftovers from the Miami Heat Thunder game. From the Thunder practice facility just across the street here in Oklahoma City, our Thunder beat writer John Rohde, and soon to be joining us upon his return. He's just gotten back from South Beach, Thunder beat writer Darnell Mayberry. Guys, Darnell's at home, and he's got a service guy calling on him. So we might get joined. We might have a special guest star. But while we're doing that, let's talk about Christmas Day leftovers. John, what are you still chewing on from the Miami Heat Thunder game?
Panic. Final 3 minutes. I don't know why it's been there against the Heat. Well, I know why it's there against the Heat. Heat's really a good team and the defending champs, but they haven't shown panic in the final 3 minutes against darn near anybody all season long. In fact, it's been the exact opposite. So they got to figure that out, Sherm. They got to figure out why's panic set in late. I know they want to do well. I know Russ wants to do well. Everybody wants to do well. And they didn't get any calls, but that's not what cost them the game. It was panic.
It's interesting, and it kind of showed up on both ends. John, you guys have written about this. Chris Bosh just flashing wide open in the lane for just sort of a dagger of a basket. And then on the offensive end, the last shot, great shot by KD, even though he was madly contested. And just sort of the foul or not foul called against Russell Westbrook will be debated by Thunder fans. That's what those fans are chewing on. Jenny, what are you chewing on still from Christmas Day leftovers?
Yeah, I think it does sort of come back to this fact that this team has lost now 5 straight to the Heat, and it doesn't really look like they're figuring things out as they go. I mean, it seems.
We've just lost them. They'll be back shortly. Technical difficulties. We're talking about the leftovers from the Thunder's loss in Miami on Christmas Day, a game that really takes on added import across the NBA for lots of reasons. One, it's a rematch of last year's NBA Finals. Two, it's a Christmas Day game. The NBA sets it up as one of its marquee games of the year. And here, lo and behold, here's Oklahoma City in that game again. The second straight year they've been in one of those great marquee games. And then third, just sort of the way the game was played and by whom. You have the two stars, Kevin Durant and LeBron James, the biggest stars in the game right now, performing on this great stage. And also the way the game was played, it did look like, as some people referred to it, as Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Of course, the Heat wrapped it up in 5 games, winning 4 straight, including 3 straight in Miami. Then Christmas Day, back in Miami with a feel of another NBA Finals matchup, a great game, a game contested right down to the end, even though the Heat wins it with a somewhat comfortable cushion. But right until that last shot, Kevin Durant, an opportunity with a 3 to tie. Russell Westbrook also off an offensive rebound with a 3 to tie. And the big controversial thing among a lot of Thunder fans is, was Russell Westbrook fouled on that play? When our folks rejoin us, which they will soon, they will take up that question. Was Russell Westbrook fouled? In the meantime, let's go ahead and check on the News OK Live question queue. We had some readers chiming in with their questions in the queue. And one of the big ones is, of course, why is Scott Brooks intent on playing this big lineup against the Miami Heat's small lineup? Darnell Mayberry wrote about this topic on News OK today and in the Oklahoman, and that this is a big reason why the Thunder, quote unquote, can't handle the Heat. Scott Brooks' insistence on the idea that his best lineup late in the game involves Kendrick Perkins and Serge Ibaka. And in spite of the fact that the Heat's playing, nobody bigger than Chris Bosh, who's about 6'10", 6'11", and playing, he's a power forward, and then surrounding Chris Bosh or surrounding LeBron James and Chris Bosh was shooters, creating mismatch. You got Serge Ibaka guarding guys on the perimeter. You have Kendrick Perkins, and the switches don't work. Kendrick Perkins went over to help on LeBron James, thereby creating an opening for Chris Bosh. We saw the Thunder players gesturing at each other, sort of about who was supposed to pick him up. So anyway, that real problem with the mismatches, which Miami is dictating right now. We'll get Darnell when he comes back to sort of address this, what he called the Thunder's hell-bent tendency to play this big lineup. He addressed it. We also had Jenny Carlson in the paper today and on News OK addressing the need for Russell Westbrook to be all he can be. That may sound like asking a lot from a guy who is just on a steep improvement climb since he entered the league. Coming out of the 2008 NBA draft. He was drafted 4th overall, really surprised some people. It's funny to look back at that. It's funny to look back on that draft and think, my gosh, he went 4th overall, but that was a big surprise pick. Jenny, we're talking before we lost you about the Christmas Day leftovers, and you were getting ready to answer my question. What are you chewing on still from Christmas Day when we lost you? Why don't you pick up from there?
Sure. I mean, I think the fact that this team has lost now 5 straight games to the Heat, it's got to be concerning. You know, it's got to be concerning to this team to know that, I mean, by all accounts, it looks like this is probably the roster that they're going to go with. As we've talked before on these Hangouts, they're right at the top of the towards the cap. So to do something different is maybe not impossible, but seems unlikely. You don't want to push yourself over that cap with all the punitive damages that you can do yourself with the salary cap. So if this is their roster and they just don't seem to defensively have enough answers in these late game situations, what are they going to do with LeBron? How are they going to keep a Dwayne Wade or a Chris Bosh from flashing wide open to the basket for easy baskets? I mean, that to me was really disappointing to see those sorts of breakdowns where guys got so wide open defensively down the stretch. It looks like to me that they're basically going to have to sort of handle LeBron by having Durant match him and almost neutralize the scoring. So then it comes down to, what do the rest of your guys do? What does Russell Westbrook do? What does Serge Ibaka do? And it looks like those two guys in particular are really still finding their way against the Heat. So to me, if this is the roster you're playing with, and it looks like it is, you still got some pieces that need to really elevate if you're going to beat the Heat, because right now the pieces around LeBron are elevating. This week it was Mario Chalmers, and you saw Dwayne Wade have a good game, but role players are tending to have big games against the Thunder. The Thunder needs their role players to then step up and be able to match, if not exceed, what those guys do. That's really going to be key, it looks like to me.
One of the big Christmas Day leftovers, of course, is the play of Russell Westbrook. You wrote about that today. You wrote about sort of the need for Russell Westbrook to be all he can be for the Thunder to beat the Heat. Jenny, we were talking about during the segment where how much he's advanced his game, but talk about that sort of what's left, that sort of next few inches that he needs to get to for the Thunder to overcome the team that took him out in 4 straight.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you watch the Thunder with any regularity, you know that Russell Westbrook has definitely improved his game. I mean, think about where he was a year ago when the NBA season got started on Christmas Day a year ago, to where he is now. I mean, his development and improvement is amazing. It's very impressive to see what he does now on a more regular basis, just more consistent in his play. But against that great Heat team, we sort of saw some reverting back to some of those other issues that have been a problem for him in the past, some out-of-control play, some bad body language, some things that we really haven't seen, and that needs to change. You know, he has to Kendrick Perkins talked about guys doing what they do individually, but then losing themselves in the team. And to me, that's exactly on par with Russell Westbrook. He is such a great individual talent, but sometimes he gets so ingrained and wrapped up in that individual game that he doesn't lose himself in the team. And so I think that's sort of the next. It's almost something psychosomatic, or I don't know what the phraseology would be, but it's a very internalized thing. That's a very minute difference we're talking about, but it's going to be key because, like I said, it looks like LeBron and Durant are basically going to just be sort of neutralizing each other with their 30 points or their 8 rebounds or whatever. It looks like their numbers are nearly the same. So you got to have Russell Westbrook play well if you want to have a chance against these guys. And I think if he starts playing like we've seen him play the rest of the year against the Heat and against really good teams, I don't think there's any reason to think that this Thunder team can't beat anybody in a 7-game series. And that includes the Heat, who I think we could all agree are pretty darn good.
So much of the calculation in the James Harden trade has been based on the idea that, well, you lost Harden's ability to facilitate and bring all these folks together, bring all these amazing individual talents together, but that can be replaced by advancements in Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, and Kevin Martin's game. We saw some of that. We've seen some of that so far this season in Kevin Durant. Specifically, Jenny, talk about what did you see that looked different about Kevin Durant from those 3 games in Miami last June?
Well, I mean, I think you're seeing more playmaking out of him. I mean, I think when you had James Harden on the team, not all the time, but because of just the way he was able to get to the basket and create, I think sometimes Kevin Durant deferred to him in that regard. And it was James, or in some cases Russell. One of those 2 guys needs to go and make a play, make a drive. But to me, Durant has now added that to his game, added another higher layer to his game when it comes to playmaking. And Sherm, you and I have talked about this. His ball handling is so much better. He's not as out of control. He still has some turnover problems, but it's not nearly what it was even last season. Much stronger, much better with the ball, and that just makes him a much more effective player, much more effective playmaker. And I think we have seen that in his game elevated in large part because they need it. No James Harden around, and lo and behold, we're finding out that these guys have skills, maybe even to a higher level than we thought before.
It's the Thunder Thursday Hangout on News OK Live. You're joining us. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, here with columnist Jenny Carlson, just rejoined by Thunder beat writer John Rohde, and we're talking about many things associated with the Thunder's loss in Miami on Christmas Day in what some people are calling Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Of course, that finals lasted 5 games. And I should just interject right now that this segment of the Thunder Thursday Hangout, or this Thunder Thursday Hangout, is sponsored by our good friends at Advent Heat, Air, and Plumbing. If you have any needs with your heating, your air conditioning, or your plumbing, call our good friends at Advent. John, we were talking about a lot of things. I want to ask you, bigger obstacle in overcoming the Heat. You talked about the panic and sort of the schizo play down the stretch by the Thunder. And that sort of goes over a lot of categories. But what do you think is a bigger obstacle in overcoming the Heat? LeBron James, the big-small matchup or mismatch, or Russell Westbrook at closing time? Which of those 3 things do you think are the bigger obstacle for the Thunder?
Well, I mean, with Russ, as far as Russ is concerned, you take the good with the bad, and the good still far outweighs the bad, and you hope he plays his way out of it because he's just so darn talented. You don't want to sit him. Jenny was saying, as the Thunder's not going to get somebody to defend LeBron, I'd like to know what planet that guy lives on, because I don't know if there is anybody who can defend LeBron. It's matchups. Sherm, here's what I'm thinking, and it's not going to happen. But we'll just go with the best matchup defensively that they can offer against the Heat. In my eyes, that's Russell, KD, Serge, Nick Collison, and Thabo. I thought that's the 5 we would see during those final second possessions in the closing 45 seconds or whatever. When I didn't see Thabo out there, and I didn't see Nick is doing, But that, to me, just seems like the most natural defensive match. So it's that the Thunder could survive the West, which is far superior to the East. But they may survive.
We're having some problems tracking John's audio. Darnell, I'll throw that question to you. You talked about why the Thunder can't beat the Heat or handle the Heat, and you talked about the mismatch thing. What's the why of the why? We know the lineup that keeps getting put out there at the end of the game. We know that it's Perkins and Ibaka trying to chase down and in some ways defend the three-point line against the Heat shooters. But why is Scott Brooks was the NBA Coach of the Year. He's took his team to the Western Conference Finals and the NBA Finals. And that's the result of the last 3 seasons. He knows what he's doing. Why is he doing it?
I think he's trying to dictate matchups, and that's what you want to do as a good team. You want to be able to impose your will on the other team, and unfortunately, Serge Ibaka and Kendrick Perkins just aren't the type of post players that can do that. If you have Pau Gasol and Dwight Howard, that's another thing. But these guys are different types of players, and I just think that it's a little misguided because Perkins is not going to make you pay with his offense, and defensively he's out there guarding LeBron James and guys like that. So and Serge Ibaka, when Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant make it a 2-man game, he's getting lost in the shuffle. So not only is he guarding guys like Mario Chalmers and Shane Battier at the three-point line, but he's also not able to contribute to his offense on the offensive end. So I just think it's a little misguided. But Scott Brooks, I think, to answer the question, is trying to impose his will on the Heat as opposed to matching up with them.
Guys, I'll throw this out to you. It's a theory that I've got about this big ball against small ball, and it's this. The Oklahoma City Thunder is a team that sometimes struggles when it comes to defensive rebounding, a team that sometimes gives up too many offensive rebounds. And in Kendrick Perkins and having him on the court, you got somebody who could have put a body on a body, a big body on the body, maybe a body on 2 bodies. So
but the problem with that though is, Mike, Kendrick Perkins is averaging 5 rebounds. So, in theory, he's a big man who can go out there and rebound, but he's not rebounding this year. And he hasn't rebounded all that well in the last 2 years. So I think that's where that argument falls apart. So if you're having a guy out there who's not rebounding, why not put your best defensive lineup out there on the floor to guard those 4 perimeter-oriented guys and also give you a chance at some better offense?
Jenny, I won't answer that for Scott Brooks, but my theory on that would be that Kendrick Perkins may not be getting those rebounds himself, but by blocking out, and that's what he does, he's creating rebounding opportunities for everybody else that would not be there or be there as easily if he's on the bench. He's one of the best in the league at that, so I think as a team they rebound better on the defensive end when he's on the court.
I think there's probably some truth to that. You see Russell Westbrook swooping in for rebounds and not having to do it against somebody who's 7 foot tall because Kendrick Perkins might have blocked them off. I think that's fair. I think you do see, guys maybe getting rebounds that wouldn't otherwise get them. But I think part of the equation too is that, having him in there allows Serge Ibaka to roam a little bit more. Serge I think is going to be rangy enough and athletic enough to be able to guard more extendedly at some point. Maybe not yet, but having Perkins in there allows him a chance to maybe spread his wings a little bit. And maybe this is a little bit of growing pains that we're seeing as much as anything. The continued evolution of Serge Ibaka is something that has been an ongoing theme for the last couple of years. And it's not over. It's still going. And I think maybe part of it is maybe, have Kendrick in there to be that last line of defense to allow Serge a chance to sort of get out and roam around a little bit. But I agree with Darnell. I think Kendrick Perkins does need to step up his game. What he said to Darnell after the Heat game, I think he was talking about himself too. I think he was talking about the team as a whole, but I think he was talking about himself and, saying, I need to step it up here some. So I don't think he left anybody out of that sort of it's time to look in the mirror comment to Darnell. So I do agree with that. I think Kendrick Perkins is valuable on the court, but he can be more valuable if he starts doing some of the things that we've seen him do in the past.
John, one last point about the matchup, big small matchup. You talked about Nick Collison sort of being left out of the conversation. You got 2 or 3 guys that left out of it, Collison and Thabo Sefolosha. Do you think there's any possibility that Serge Ibaka is staying a part of this equation, part of this last, end of game lineup, even in spite of a small thing, because the Thunder thinks eventually he's going to be a transcendent defender who can protect the basket and the three-point line? Do you think that's the way they want him to grow? And so that's the reason why they have him guarding the perimeter.
Well, sure, yeah, learning by experience, absolutely. But the thing of it is, if he's truly going to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, he can't be a liability at certain times. Defensive Player of the Year is somebody you always want out there when you need a key stop. He's not there yet. It's mainly perimeter stuff. He's probably the best help defender in the league with his shot blocking ability, but it's got to be the whole package. He's got to pull through. I don't have a problem with Serge on the court as much as I have a problem with Perkins right now. I think it should be Nick instead of Perk, and I definitely think it should be Thabo instead of Kevin Martin, and that's who was out there late.
Interesting, and we'll take that. There'll be more on this end of game lineup for a long time. Darnell, is it possible that the biggest obstacle for the Thunder when they're trying to overcome the Heat is the fact that all of these guys had the misfortune of being born in the same 5-year span as LeBron James? Is it possible that LeBron James, this is just his time and it's intersecting with Oklahoma City's time?
It's possible, of course, but you look at what the Mavs did to those guys, and I think it's definitely not out of the question of being able to beat Miami. And this team is more talented than that Mavs team was 2 years ago. So I just think the Thunder. We've talked about it a lot in this hangout. I think the Thunder needs to learn how to execute down the stretch. They get a little panicky when the game's on the line. I think some of the matchups aren't favorable for the Thunder, and they try to play Miami style. They got to be able to stick to what they do, and that's getting everyone involved. Miami can't beat the Thunder when Serge Ibaka and Thabo Sefolosha and Kendrick Perkins are involved offensively. When it's just Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, then the Heat can easily beat the Thunder. I mean, it's a close game, but these last 5 games have all ended the same way, and that's close but no cigar for the Thunder.
Let's go on to we got a game on coming up tonight. The Dallas Mavericks are back in town. A year ago this time, there was an incredible matchup right after Christmas. One of the Thunder's first home games after Christmas, and of course Kevin Durant hit a monster 3-point shot to beat the Mavericks in a huge game. This is a very different Mavericks looking team right now, but Dirk is back, and he says his knee is 100%. So Jenny, what do we make of the Mavs?
Well, I definitely think they're better with Dirk than without him. I don't think Dirk's knee may be 100%, but I'm not sure his conditioning is. I mean, he still looks like he's a little bit sluggish to me, and then that's to be expected. He's been out, he hasn't been in game shape, and here he is jumping in to the mix almost 30 games into this season. So I think conditioning will take some time, but obviously they're better with him than without him. But the Mavs they're searching right now. I mean, obviously Derek Fisher was brought in, then he becomes a starter because they didn't like what Darren Collison was doing, but now Collison's back starting after Fisher gets hurt. And their second team, which used to be a real surge for that team, you brought Jason Terry off the bench. You brought, even a couple of years ago, J.J. Barea off the bench. Now the guys they bring off the bench are kind of like, this really looks like a JV team out there. So they're definitely not the deep, talented Mavs team of a couple of years ago. I think it'll be a good game just because it seems like these post-Christmas games against the Mavs turn out to all be great games that the Thunder plays, but not the Mavs team that we saw a couple of years ago, definitely, and really a shadow of what they were a year ago in my mind.
John, are the Mavericks playoff contenders? We've frozen John again. We got to get his computer into tech support. Darnell, let's jump ahead of the Mavericks. Let's talk about the Clippers. See a lot written in the line. They're on a 14-game winning streak. The Thunder had a winning streak of its own. that ended last Thursday in Minneapolis. You were there. But I see a lot of this, and I'm wondering what your take on it. True or false? Clippers greater than Thunder?
Right now, yeah, by half a game. Clippers are 22-6. The Thunder's 21-6. So if you look at it just going off the record, the Clippers are better now. The Thunder has beaten the Clippers already this year, and that was a little earlier in the season. The Clippers didn't have some of their guys, Chauncey Billups, Grant Hill. These guys are still on the shelf and trying to get back. But I think they're just a talented team. They're deep. They're athletic. They have big men. They've got great guard play, starting with Chris Paul, the sixth man of the year probably at this point, and Jamal Crawford. So they've got a lot of talent, top to bottom, and they can put pressure on the Thunder. I think that's the most dangerous team in the West for the Thunder is the Los Angeles Clippers. And
Darnell, you alluded to it. The Clippers, they come out with a very deep team that's maybe a little long in the tooth, and you got Grant Hill and Caron Butler and those guys, but that's second team stuff. You've got a very versatile team, a bunch of long guys. You've got Lamar Odom, allows them to play small, and then you've got superstars in Chris Paul and also Blake Griffin. But Jenny, do you see the Clippers being the greatest threat to the West, out west to the Thunder?
Well, I think you definitely have to see them as a threat. There's no doubt about that. I'm really curious to see what the Lakers do. Getting Steve Nash back, they do look like a different team. And I wasn't really sure that would be the case. But he's back, and they definitely look like a team that could cause some trouble for some other teams in the West. Now, the question of age and knees and legs and, how are these guys going to hold up? We don't know. Obviously, Steve Nash, had a body breakdown earlier this year. Paul Gasol's had his issues. Will they all be healthy come playoff time? I don't know. But to me, that's the other team in the West that sort of has piqued my interest. Obviously so vastly different than the storyline of the Clippers. Clippers young and exuberant, and you wonder, do they have enough experience to really threaten the Thunder? Where you've got the Lakers old and veteran, and you wonder, do they have the body parts to threaten the Thunder? So I think the biggest threats are in LA. I'm just not sure right now who at the end of the year is going to end up being the bigger threat.
We'll end this Thunder Thursday hangout with a question and a discussion about an old friend. Darnell, the big news out of New Jersey today is the firing of Brooklyn. The big news out of Brooklyn today is the firing of Avery Johnson as the Nets coach and the hiring of PJ Carlesimo. Is that
there
PJ at the door?
No, it's Plummer. I got to run, but it's sad news to see Avery Johnson go. He was just coach of the month, and hopefully PJ can turn that Nets team around. I always liked PJ. He was a great guy. It's debatable or whatever you want to say about him as a coach, but he's a great guy, and I'm hoping he does well. See you guys.
See ya. Old friend PJ coming back. Jenny, what do you make of that?
Hey, I mean, it's a good chance for him. That team clearly has talent. We can say that much about the Nets, but they're obviously missing something right now, and it goes fairly deep. You see them struggling like they have. I mean, they got off to such a great start, and now, they're not anywhere close to being as good as their cross-borough rivals, the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks are playing some fantastic ball of late. So they definitely have the pieces. I think they may have more talent than the Knicks, but right now, definitely not playing well. I was a little surprised to see the Nets pull the trigger this fast because I do think Avery Johnson's a really good coach. But maybe PJ's got, as we know from when he got fired, PJ, it wasn't so much about X's and O's, because in my mind, PJ Carlesimo is a really good X's and O's coach, but the fit wasn't there personality-wise. And maybe we'll find out that he was a good fit, though, for the Nets. Maybe he'll be able to, do personality-wise and, sort of psychologically with that team what they need. Because right now, it looks like to me it is more mental with them as they are a really talented team. So maybe the fit will be better. We'll have to see. Interim coach for now, but maybe if things get turned around, who knows? Maybe he gets a chance to be a true head coach without that interim tag again.
And the Nets, of course, coming into Oklahoma City on January, it looks like January the 2nd when the Thunder host the Brooklyn Nets. PJ, of course, he's in the crosshairs of Darren Williams, who has gotten his last 2 coaches fired, Jenny. He got Jerry Sloan retired / fired out in Salt Lake City at the Utah Jazz. Then he gets traded to Brooklyn. If we count, that whole situation, now Avery Johnson's gone. So look out, PJ. You better get along with your star point guard. And we'll, on that point, we'll say farewell. That's all for this Thunder Thursday Hangout on News OK Live. We thank our good friends at Advent Heat, Air, and Plumbing for their sponsorship of this Hangout. And we ask you to stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman. Thanks, Jenny.
See ya.